Hello and welcome to our Homeschool Stories collection. My name is Abby. I'm with Woven Homeschool. This is our second homeschool story, and I'm so excited today to have Gabi Haberer come on with us to share today. So I'm going to introduce Gabi to you in just a moment here. But let me just tell you, if you are new here, I am from wovenhomeschool.com. I provide resources for homeschooling parents of all different backgrounds and experience levels. And it is my hope with these homeschool stories to create a place where we can gain perspective from homeschooling parents of all stripes. So there's no one right way to homeschool. So it's my hope by including people from different backgrounds and different perspectives, different experience levels, that we can encourage each other and give each other some perspective in our own journeys. All right, so welcome, Gabi. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks.
Yay! Gabi is she is an educational professional. She has been a teacher. She's been a curriculum specialist. She's been an elementary principal, and she is also a music teacher, music educator. And she's taken that world online to share her talents with the world. So, Gabi, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah, thanks, Abby. Gabi. That's kind of fun.
Gabi.
My name is Gabi Haberer, and I'm a homeschooling mama. We've actually homeschooled from the beginning since my firstborn was here with us. And prior to that, I was in the public education sphere. You know, you don't know what you don't know. And so I didn't know really what homeschooling was. I had this impression that homeschooling was just this kind, I don't know, this weird kind of unsocialized element of society. But my husband had the amazing foresight to encourage me to stay home. And I really was at the height of my career, but I was becoming very disillusioned with a lot of the things that I was seeing in public education. And there I was almost close to the top. My goal was to move into the superintendent's office one day. And, I'm Spanish is my first language. And so I was also, in the bilingual arena there for a while. And my husband was like, why don't you stay home? And then you can decide whether or not you'll go back into that. And so, then my son came, and I don't know. I didn't look back. I could not separate myself from him. He was beautiful and lovely in every way. And the idea of sending him off to school at some point in time just put the fear in me. And so our homeschooling journey began. And we homeschool. We're, I'd say, a little bit eclectic. We're a little bit unschooling and a little bit Charlotte Mason. And so there is so much freedom in this lifestyle that, I don't know. I love every day that we spend together, and that we're in our little ecosystem here in our home. But I am a classically trained pianist and cellist. I have a private music studio where I teach new beginning piano students and early childhood music classes. And it's just been a lot of fun. So, and I now have a membership community where I take essentially my studio and put it online. So
that is so wonderful. It's so exciting. I'm excited to dive into some of these. So what year of homeschooling are you on now?
This is my 9th year. I'll count it as my 9th year because we started from the beginning. I guess when I first held that first baby, I was like, I can't let go. And so we just made that decision right then and there. I didn't know what I was doing. And sadly, I think my experience in my career in public education was really to my detriment, because in the beginning, the first couple of years, I thought I had to replicate and mimic what was going on in that sphere out there. I didn't know any better. And so, but I do now. And as the years go by and I get older and he gets older and, our family becomes a little bit more established in this lifestyle, there's more and more freedom. I absolutely love. I'm glad that my husband had the foresight to make that decision before I did. It's 9 years. I'd say
9 years. That is awesome.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting because I had kind of a similar experience. I was an education major, music first, and then I went back to get my music ed. I had a similar experience where the thought of putting him into school, I just felt like,
I know it's wrong. There's something intrinsically wrong here. Yeah.
And I think that, there's part of it, maybe a bit of fear that I felt like I shouldn't have had that fear. But then also I feel like there's part of it that's just this lovely extension of parenting where you just feel like, well, we've been together and we've been learning together and exploring together this whole time. Why stop now? Why outsource it now?
Yeah, there's when I was a principal, and this is again, I lament that I even had this perspective or attitude. So I apologize at a time. I didn't know then. But I was a principal. I was a young principal. I think I was late 20s, early 30s. And we used to have this thing at the beginning of every school year called the kindergarten peel. And all the moms would be down in the kindergarten wing and they're all crying and the babies are crying. And because you're literally separate. It's almost like tearing the fabric of a garment, right? The fibers that are meant to be together, and you're pulling them apart, and the mom feels attention and the child feels attention. But of course I was like, oh, I'd radio, let's get those moms out of there, please, and send them over to the cafeteria. So I'd have this coffee and donut thing for them to try to soothe them. And how wrong that was, but it's, once they come and you've spent all this time nurturing and providing and sheltering, not to mention the 9 months, they were with you, it's kind of hard to let go.
Yeah. And I think that's I think it's a universal feeling for most moms, when it's time to let your child go somewhere.
But I think we suppress it.
Yeah. Or you think like, okay, they're going to be fine. We're going to let them go. I did the same thing when I was teaching in a preschool my first year after college. Just when parents would come in, we'd always tell them like, okay, we're going to get them playing and you sneak out, so we can, distract the child. And, as soon as the child realized mom was gone, of course, and most of them did do fine. They did adjust, but it's a hard adjustment, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your background in education. Tell us about everything that you did in the public school system.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I started out piano performance. That's a long story, Abby. I started out piano performance, and because I'm bilingual and Spanish is my first language, I'm here in Texas, and I remember a kind of like an education recruiter coming in from the university and coming in and saying, look, we really need bilingual teachers. We will incentivize the transfer of your piano performance, over to music ed if you come over, because we need more bilingual teachers both in the classroom, essentially in every aspect of art and music and PE, etc. And so, I was putting myself through school, taking out loans, working 3 jobs. And so I thought, wow, okay, well, I have this ability. So I moved from there over to bilingual education, and then moved into the classroom eventually. So did music, and then I was a classroom teacher. And then from there, I became a curriculum specialist. I got my master's, and then after being at central office, which did not suit me because I missed the children, I missed the environment, the atmosphere of a campus. I became an assistant principal, and then from there eventually became a principal. And so, and I mostly worked in districts with low socioeconomic populations, with limited English proficiency is what they were called then. I think they're called English language learners now. But bilingual students mostly. So
Oh, that's a wonderful thing though, that you were able to use your own language in that way, right? To share, because I do think that that's a need, right? To make students. I know my husband has he is not fluent in Spanish, but he's had Spanish language in school, and then he's worked with a lot of Spanish speakers, and so whenever he has had a Spanish student come in, I know they're always just like so excited that there's someone who who
can understand them.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think it's a real need. So that's wonderful. So as a curriculum specialist, if there's anyone who doesn't know what that is, would you just explain that for us a little bit?
Yeah, so I essentially was an elementary curriculum specialist. I worked with our education agency, our state education agency, and essentially adopted and or wrote and or supported the scaffolding of curriculum options for our district, particularly elementary, and then even more specifically, English language learners. Okay. And so, and then I helped essentially create professional development opportunities for teachers in those curriculum options. So, kind of an administrative role, I guess. Administrative as in like paperwork, not,
Right. Yeah, no, that's great though. And it's interesting because I know whenever you're a new homeschooler, that's usually like the thing that people are wondering about.
Yes. What?
right? How do
Yeah.
you choose this? How do you pick the right one? Or how do I make this work for my child? So
Right. And I
that's
would contend, Abby, not to go off on this rabbit trail, but I'd contend
yeah,
that's actually the wrong question.
yeah.
It really shouldn't be what curriculum should I choose, because the curriculum can always be adopted later. It really
Mhm,
is, who is my child? I haven't really spent a whole lot of time with them because he's
mhm,
been, in the public school setting. And also what goals and what objectives do I want to bring out of our homeschool lifestyle?
mhm.
And so, because the curriculum will come and go. I can't tell you how many
Yes.
hundreds of curriculum vendors are out at the homeschool conventions, and they may all be wonderful and good and stuff, but you need to learn your child and how your child learns, then be able to go out and look for products that might help supplement some of that. And
Mhm,
I would even contend that you can homeschool with no curriculum.
mhm.
And so it's not a requirement by any means.
Right, right. Oh, that's really cool perspective. I also think it's important for the curriculum for the parent to be able to work with whatever tool you're using too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like it's really more important to focus on the family,
Mhm.
and what works for that particular family,
Absolutely.
than it is to find just the right thing that meets your ideals. I know that's something I
Right.
struggled with, especially coming from the education
Oh,
world,
yeah.
in
Because
homeschooling.
because curriculum is supreme, right, in that setting. And you live and die by the scope and sequence.
Right.
And the reality is that, and then when you finally get to a point where you're selecting curriculum, my advice would be you have to find, as a mama, something that resonates with you too. Because
Mhm.
if it's so cumbersome and all these checklists you've got to, navigate through and all these, you'll be more reluctant to actually implement it. And then your children
Right.
will be even more reluctant to actually absorb it or engage with
Mhm.
the content. And so,
Right. Oh,
yeah.
that's so smart. Yeah.
You have to
That's
kind
so
of,
good. I know the first one that we used, I loved the curriculum itself, but the pace felt too fast
hmm,
for my firstborn. And I was sitting there struggling, trying to keep up with the pace of this curriculum.
yeah.
And it took me a few years to
Yeah.
finally be like,
Wait a minute. This is not
okay,
for me.
this
Yeah.
is this is our homeschool, and it's
Yep.
okay if I don't keep up at the same pace. And if some
Correct.
things we go faster and some things we go slower, right?
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned that you started to feel disillusionment with the public education system. Now, go as far as you're comfortable going, but can you tell me a little bit about what led to that disillusionment?
Oh, Abby, how far do you want me to go? Because people are going to go, oh, that crazy Gabby. She's, I can say, and this is not, I don't ever want, when I communicate this perspective, I never want to make anyone feel judged
Mhm,
or feel as though I have some authoritative perspective that everyone else lacks. I can
mm,
tell you I have insider perspective because I was there, and I can only speak from my experience and the things that I saw. But I can say one of the things that really, one of the major underpinnings, I guess, to my disillusionment with the public school system is money.
mm,
Everything is wrapped up with around, so standardized testing essentially is the driver for 98% of everything that goes on in a public school because it's tied fiscally, it's tied to money.
how much money?
And so I, as a principal, have a budget, have a certain amount, and I can then get more books or get more teachers or get more teacher aides or hire more custodial staff or whatever it is that my campus needs. But I need that money first. And so, and how do I achieve that? I achieve that through standardized testing.
Mhm,
And so I think that the way the system is set up in such a way that I don't, now there are good teachers out there. I won't deny that there aren't.
mhm.
But as I get older, I become a little bit more anti-government school than I was previously because okay, well, I don't, how far do you want me to go with this, Abby? Because I could go down a rabbit trail. So
Whatever
you
you're
stop me
comfortable with,
anytime.
Abby.
Stop me anytime. Because again, I don't want anyone listening to this to think, oh, wow, this is bad. This is wrong. Every
Mhm.
family is on a journey. And
Sure.
I think every family and every mother instinctually knows what's best for her children. And I
Mhm.
think that we suppress that instinct because society and the world around us tells us that we have to do it a certain way, and we don't.
Mm.
And so the first thing I would want to encourage anyone to do is to really, what does your gut say about the way that your child is being educated? Are you okay with you sending your child out for 8 hours a day when in reality, let me back up and say they only get about 2 hours of instruction a day,
Mhm.
even though they're there for 8 hours? I know it because I did it myself. By the
Right.
time you include transitions and PE and going to recess and getting 25 children quiet, you lose time. So you
Oh,
really only have about 2 hours of instruction, of solid
yeah. Mhm.
instruction dispersed throughout an 8-hour day. Now,
Mhm.
with that, what sort of mindset, worldview do you want your child to be taught? Because someone, whoever spends the most time with them, is the one that's going to be teaching them their worldview. Now,
Mhm.
if you have certain religious beliefs, if you have certain theological perspectives, if you have some political persuasions, whatever element, that
Mhm.
you as a family adhere to principally, those things, certain things will be taught in a public education system and other things are going to be taught in a homeschool. So I
Mm.
think you have to make a decision as to what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. For
Yeah.
me, after the things I saw, and it's 10 times worse than it was when I left 10 years
Mhm.
ago. Like it's a completely different ballgame, but money is still the driver and it always has been the driver. And I think that our educational system, again, stop me anytime you want me to stop, Abby. But I think that our system really is kind of designed to suppress the individual creativity that a
Mm.
child has. And so, I mean, imagine, really logically think about this, Abby. If you have to go to the bathroom, you have to
Mhm.
raise your hand and ask permission. Okay. When
Mhm.
your body's already telling you, I really have to tinkle, I've got to go.
Right.
But you have to ask permission. I remember I was a student teacher. This was obviously years ago, back in my 20s. And they put me with a very experienced veteran teacher. And I mostly was kind of a lackey. I was just stapling papers for her, grading and whatnot.
Right.
But there was a little boy, and I was telling my son this the other day because he's like, what do they do at public school? And I was like, let me tell you a story. But he had to go to the bathroom. I don't know if he was considered a troublemaker or not. I say that with, quotations, but because I wasn't there long enough. But he had to go to the bathroom and he asked, and the teacher essentially shushed him. And about 5 minutes later, you could see him kind of fidgeting in his chair. He asked
Mhm.
again, and she said, I told you you're not going. You already went earlier this morning. How many times do you really have to go to the bathroom? And I thought, poor kid, maybe he's really got to go. Maybe he has a bladder infection. Maybe he's got, long
Yeah.
story short, the poor baby ended up wetting his pants. And
Oh.
nobody noticed until a little girl called out and said, look at the puddle under Charlie's chair, And so the child was humiliated the rest of the
Yeah.
semester that I was there, bullied the rest of the semester I was there, taunted. And I felt horrible for him, Abby.
Yeah.
I thought, for whatever reason he was at, but that's essentially the system that you send your child into when you go. And so they have to ask permission to talk. They have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. They've got to, they get 20 minutes to eat by the time they all get through the line. And so it's just not, there were things like that that just were not resonating with me. I thought,
Mhm.
this is not what I want anymore. And I left at the height of my career. I thought there has to be another way. And I thought, perhaps in my
Mhm.
mind, I thought maybe a private school would be better because I didn't know any better.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't, that's just a couple of checklists there that I can add. If you want more, let me know because I can dive into
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
perspectives.
Well, yeah, there's so much to unpack here, right? It's interesting because my experience, I did teach in a couple different private schools
Mhm.
after graduating before having my own children. But what you were saying about it sort of stifling the individual and individual creativity, it's interesting because I think as teachers, when we go into it, we want to support the
Oh,
individual.
absolutely.
Right? You go in
Yeah.
because you have a passion for seeing that child grow,
Mhm.
and you want them to engage with the material and
Yeah.
actually enjoy it and not just zone out. But there is something about the system when you get into it that you're
Yeah.
just not able.
Correct.
As much as a teacher wants to, they're not able to give that same level of individual attention. And I think the teachers who
Correct.
really succeed at doing a good job engaging the kids with the material and seeing the individuals as individuals are those couple teachers that we remember in our minds,
Mhm.
right? When we look back and we're like, oh, I love that teacher. That teacher
Yeah.
was the best teacher. Um, and they are the ones who like really stand out, right? But it is so hard to do. And that is because, as music teachers, like I know so much of the time actually like learning and exploring music fell to the wayside in order to prepare for the concert.
Yeah.
The teacher, a lot of times exploring the material and taking all those rabbit trails that you want to take
Mhm.
fall to the wayside in order to prepare for the tests, right?
Correct.
And so I do see that. I read a really interesting article. I'll link to it in the notes for this. Um, an article, it was talking about a hamburger education. I can't remember the author of it right now. I'm blanking. But they were talking about, when you think about food, You can either eat a meal that has been cooked by someone. Maybe it's a home cooked meal where there's tradition and there's love and there's
Hmm.
recipes that's been passed down, and you create this meal that for years to come you look back and you know, remember it fondly. Or you can think of it like someone who is a chef who plays with all different flavors, and they come up with these expert techniques and expert combinations that create, you know, really an experience for all the senses. Or you can go to McDonald's and get the same hamburger that's been put
That
out
everybody else
across
gets.
the country that everybody
Yeah.
else gets, and it's put to a certain standard, and it has to be, you know, I actually worked at McDonald's for one summer of my life when I was
Mhm.
in college. It was my summer job. And so I know that everything comes in packages that go, you know, you get them out from the freezer, and everything is timed. So, like, at least this is how it was. I shouldn't say now. I can't speak to McDonald's now. I can only speak to my particular McDonald's in Pennsylvania, you know, whatever it was, 15, however many years ago now.
Yeah.
So, but everything is timed, right? You know, you put the burger on the griddle, you have your little timer that goes off,
Yeah.
you flip the burger, then you put it into the warmer, and it can only stay in there for X amount of time.
It's
Once
crazy.
it passes that time, you have to throw it out. But it is ready so that it can be put in a bag and served to the next person coming through the drive-through, right?
That's right.
And it was comparing education to these different types of eating experiences. And it was saying essentially, like, either we can have the slow education where we really care more about the flavors, the exploration, the figuring out, where we can put things together, where we can listen to an individual taste, where we can create quality, even if it takes longer, right? Or we can have the hamburger education where we shove everybody through at an average pace, and you know, with average time. If they don't meet it by the certain time, then they get thrown. No, they don't necessarily get thrown out, but they get held
Well,
back, right?
they
Or
can't get
put in
thrown
the
out. They essentially are labeled.
exactly. Okay. So this is a way to think about it, right? And whether or not you agree with it, I thought it was a really interesting concept, and I think there's a lot of weight to it.
Absolutely.
And you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't have enough experience in the public school system specifically to say, but it does seem like there's so much pressure coming from above that it becomes very difficult to
Yeah.
teach in the way you would like to teach and engage
Correct.
students in the way you would like to.
No,
That
I would agree with that. And I really like the analogy because if you
Mhm.
actually do a study of the history of compulsory education in this country, you will find out that it really was generated. It comes from a Prussian model, but it really was generated and created in order to create a homogeneous mass of workers, so that
Mhm.
the upper echelon could continue being the upper echelon, right? The elite. And then the rest of us are just lowly workers that all we do is obey. We work 9 to 5, we pay our mortgages, but there's no, it's interesting because if you look at society, the creatives, the innovators, the ones that are building and transforming typically don't have college educations. And many of them have been homeschooled or have an alternative type of education that was not the public school system. And you wonder why that is. Why is
Mhm.
it that, Elon Musk or some of these other people but then you also go back and you look at Abraham Lincoln and Thomas
Mhm.
Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and all these other people that didn't have compulsory education. And these were these amazing, innovative thinkers, right?
Mm.
That essentially established the foundation of what is now our country in many ways. And so
Mm.
it kind of makes you think, what's going on here? I would recommend an author to anyone that's listening called John Taylor Gatto. He
Oh, yeah.
has written several books, but one of the most popular of his writings is a book called Dumbing Us Down.
Mm.
And it is, the title kind of tells you just about everything, but it gives
Mhm.
you a history of compulsory education. And really his experience as a 30-year veteran teacher in one of the most economically challenged areas of the country kind of speaks for itself, I think. So
Mm.
very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely really interesting. Um, yeah, I do think, you know, and I won't keep going down this road, but I do think that sometimes we train the curiosity out of our
Mhm.
kids in school,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and we don't mean to, but
Well,
it's
there's
really
not enough time.
the
There's
system.
not enough time to explore it. And you're also not going to get tested on it, which means that our campus is not going to get recognized for it, which means our district won't get money for it. And so
Mhm.
you eventually start to see how the chain is connected. And you really, it's not that I think teachers want to quell that creativity and that
Mhm.
exploration. They simply do not have the bandwidth with 25
Mhm.
plus children in their classroom, nor the
Mhm.
time to invest in each individual person
Mhm.
to explore that creativity, because you know what? Time is money in a school district and I need the money. So
Right,
it's yeah,
right, and you have
it's
to
just the way
survive as a teacher too, right?
the
Um,
system's set up.
yeah, it's really difficult. So we already talked a little bit about, just what led you to keep your own child home, right? You just wanted to keep on with that close relationship that you had. How did your previous educational experience affect your homeschooling
Mercy.
perspective?
Abby, I don't know how much time you have, but I can tell you, I will say it affected me not in a positive way. Because again, when you come out of that system, and not only did I come out of that system, I have degrees from that system, I worked in that system, I managed that system. When you come out of that, there is a certain mindset, a certain perspective, a certain worldview, a certain approach to what you think education is, because they told you that's what it is. And so that's what you
Mhm.
do. And so, yeah, it was to my detriment, I would say. And
Mhm.
still to this day, I struggle because although we have a very free and liberal homeschool approach, there are times at 2 o'clock in the morning where I'm like, I didn't get math done today. Oh no, is my
Mhm.
child going to fail? Is he going to get
Right.
behind? And there is no such thing as behind.
Mhm.
Those are arbitrary standards set up by a rogue panel of, and most of them aren't even educators, the school board, right? You have, and then people at our, in my state anyway, our education agency, that create these artificial standards. And so
Mhm.
children that don't meet that standard are labeled. They typically are tested for some type of, learning disability, when in reality, they don't have anything. They don't learn that way. And so
Mhm.
it's really, I would say it was to my detriment. And I still to this day struggle with a little bit of wanting to maintain that structure. Not that structure is a bad thing. Like, I
Right.
please don't
Sure.
get it's just I want to be able to teach all these things, but the reality is that's not our lifestyle, and nor is it a pressure that I feel that my child should. One day he'll have to pay a mortgage, and so why am I going to create this rigidity that is unnecessary and arbitrary in many ways? And so
Mhm.
to some extent, I could say, okay, it helped me in the sense that, okay, I see what curriculum resonates with me, but I don't think that has anything to do with my experience as an educator. It's what it has to do with me as a mom. I know
Mm.
my child well enough to know this curriculum is not for us. It's not even for me. And this curriculum, okay, it's got some good things. I can adapt it and tweak it to my lifestyle, to our lifestyle, and we can go from there. But I'd say it's something that I have to literally shirk off
Right.
frequently. So
Right. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I know what my first year of homeschooling, I really struggled. I was like, you need to sit still. You should stop playing with that toy while we're doing math. Like, set down your Legos, sit down, look here,
yeah.
like,
Yep. Yep. And that comes from that system. That comes
right.
from that, I need your complete attention. You need to stop talking, stop moving. You essentially need to be a robot while I deposit this information into you.
Yes,
And
and I
that's
think that's a
what
really
the school
important
system is.
distinction,
Yeah.
right? Depositing information into your child
Right.
instead of like, "Hey, we are going to figure this out together
Hmm.
today," right?
Yeah.
I did a talk for the Digital Homeschool Convention um, on teacher-parent qualifications as my
Mm.
perspective
Oh,
sometimes
how
as
fun.
an education major, because you a lot of times as a homeschooling parent think like, "What the heck am I doing?"
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know, even as a music teacher, like, I'm not an algebra teacher, like,
But
okay,
let me interrupt you, Abby. What does that say about your schooling?
right,
Right? When
yeah,
you come out of that system not feeling competent enough to be able to teach your own
yeah,
child, to me, that's a witness to the educational system right there. When you come out insecure, not knowing what to
right,
do, how do I
right,
adopt this? I need a curriculum that tells me A, B, and C and how to do it. To me, that
mm,
speaks a lot to that type. But anyway, didn't mean
yeah,
to
no,
interrupt
no,
you.
no, no, it's really interesting. Yeah, no, that's definitely a fair point. I think too, like just recognizing like that I don't necessarily have to know everything, but I have
Correct.
to be willing to be curious and put the work in with my
Right.
kids, right?
Mhm.
And also recognizing when we're talking about, getting your child to hold still while you deposit this information, recognizing, at least for me, because I homeschooled from the beginning, and I think even if your child has been in school, but you've switched to homeschooling, when they're home, right? Julie Bogart talks about this in her book, The Brave Learner. She
Mhm.
talks about home is the place where you kick off your shoes, where you get in your pajamas, you get comfortable, you
Yeah.
lounge on the couch. Home is not the place where you expect to sit up and sit straight and sit
Right.
still. And I think as homeschooling parents, we need to be okay with working within our natural habitat,
Yeah.
right? It is not
Correct.
an institutional setting, and we shouldn't treat it like it is.
Correct.
It's not
Correct.
that, the reason that kids have to do that in the institutional setting is just that there's so many of them.
There's order. You need to maintain order.
And you have to
Yeah.
maintain your order, or at least we think we have to, right?
Yeah.
I'd be interested in like some alternative schooling models where it's not set up the same way,
Mhm.
Montessori or Waldorf schooling, where maybe it's a little bit of different expectations. I don't know
Sure.
exactly what their management philosophies are. But yeah, it is just interesting. But I know in my experience, as time went on, I started loosening on some of those things. We still do have a structure, and I'm still like very much a check off the boxes type of girl, but I'm trying to train myself to go slower and to be okay with taking rabbit trails, to be okay with dropping
Yeah.
things sometimes. Like basically I'm like, if we do like math, reading, and writing in the morning,
Mhm.
then I feel like we can like, I do have a schedule, like when I do history, when I do music, all of
Mhm.
that. But like, it's more to make sure we get around to it. And I
Yes.
need to like be willing to relax a little bit sometimes
Yeah.
for the sake of actual learning taking place, not for the sake of being willy-nilly, but for the sake of like letting learning take precedence over the schedule. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. No, I absolutely agree with that.
So let me switch gears just a minute here. So let's switch over from your educational side to your music side. I want to hear, as a music professional, just a little bit about how that plays into your homeschool, because I think, as a musician, I spoke with Gabi about this before. For me, I'm primarily a classical singer. And so, it's interesting because like I'll be trying to practice and my kids are like,
Oh,
Mama, you're loud.
yeah. It's not possible most days, but
I know, right? It's
yeah.
tricky. But I found with our own homeschool that music has sort of just become kind of like a natural part of what we do. I have not actually had as much like music class time. This year I'm trying to be a little bit more formal with my son because he's 9, or no, he's not 9, he's 10.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to be like, okay, you're old enough now that you can like, work your way through a book,
Mhm.
he understands like the basic of music reading and all that.
Mhm.
So I'm like, we can do this. You should start like actually studying it,
Yeah.
but I find that it becomes sort of like a natural part of our lives, like every day they're listening to music, or we listen to this podcast, Classics for Kids. Or the kids always want to go out into our studio and have a band. They always want to
Oh,
go
I love
play
that.
together. They're like trying to play the Beatles songs, which is
It's so
awesome.
amazing.
So anyway, I would just love to hear a little bit about how, as a music professional, how that has transferred into your homeschool.
Yeah, well, kind of like you, Abby, it's interesting because it's always like the pastor's kid that doesn't get taught the scripture very well. It's kind of like the music teacher's kid doesn't always get taught the music very
Yeah,
well
I had the same.
because I'm busy teaching everybody else's kids, and so it's we are kind of like you trying to. He's 9 now, and I think he has reached the maturity that will enable him to be a little bit more structured in our music lessons. But I will say there's so much amazing research out there on brain development and music education. And that's actually what I speak on when I go to, music and homeschool conferences. We essentially are born musical creatures. Music language actually precedes language development in the brain. It uses the same structures in the brain. And there was, I'll give you a quick example. I don't know who would do this, but they took a 3-day-old baby. This is researchers in Canada a couple years ago, took a 3-day-old baby and they put him through an MRI, attached all the nodules and stuff to his head and turned on music, and his brain lit up. I'm talking like fireworks. So we turn the music off and they have the mom sing to the child. and the same structures in the brain, like fireworks, just started
Oh my
lighting up.
goodness.
And then they had the mom actually talk to the baby, and the exact same structures in the brain all started lighting up like fireworks.
Mm.
And what
Wow.
was amazing about that, and what they concluded essentially, and what I can derive from that, is that we are all born musical creatures. Music precedes language development. And how amazing that that infant interpreted his mother's voice
Mm.
as music. And so, I mean, my encouragement to anyone to incorporate music education into their homes is play it. Just have it on all the time. Have it on. I mean, obviously, you don't have to have it on all the time, but
Right.
it's just, if there's an opportunity to engage in music and the exploration of music, then you should. Because I mean, think
Mhm.
about any toddler, you put on music, and it's the cutest thing. You could see videos on YouTube, but
Yeah.
when babies start to dance, they kind of just bounce up and down. They feel the rhythm in their little
Yeah.
bodies, right? They
Yeah.
feel something internal that resonates with them. And it's the same thing for all of us. I mean, think about a song that you heard that you comes on the radio or whatever, and it takes you back to 1984 or something, or wherever, year you're like, oh, I remember I liked this boy who didn't like me, and we were all sitting at a cafeteria table. And I mean, whatever it is, it takes
Yeah.
you back to. So musicians have this filing system in their brain, essentially,
Mm.
and you can pull out a file that tags sensory input with that file. And so you can almost kind of go back and remember the smell of the cafeteria. You can remember what you were wearing, what color you were wearing that day. You can remember your best friend's perfume and how bad it smelled, and how you liked this boy and he didn't like you, or whatever the situation was, right?
Mhm.
It'll take you right back to that. And that's what I think is so amazing about music. Music is such a powerful agent, and it really is a universal agent too. All of us experience and can be moved emotively by music. And
Yeah.
so I believe here in my studio, as well as my membership community, that every child should have access to music education.
Mhm.
Now, music education has different platforms, I would say.
Mhm.
I was a classically trained pianist, which meant that technique and rhythm were supreme to everything. And I was built as a competitor, essentially to go on. So you go to one competition, you finish that one, and you move on to the next one. There
Mhm.
was very little exploration,
Mhm.
improvisation, and composition that occurred in my own education. And I lament that. I've had to go back and
Mhm.
teach myself that stuff. Self-learning. What does Charlotte Mason say? Self-education is real education or true education. I've butchered her quote there. But the things that intrinsically motivate you, right, are the ones that you go pursue. It's kind of like our children. And
Mhm.
so, how has it impacted me? Well, we have music in the house all the time, different
Mhm.
genres of music, and of course music learning, because those are the things that actually stimulate those parts in the brain. Musicians actually have bigger, like physical, bigger, better brains than non-musicians, and we have the ability to complete a task more efficiently than our non-musician counterparts. And
Mhm.
so if music provides all these amazing, and those are just a few, all these amazing neurological benefits, the question should be, why is your child not enrolled in music learning? And that could be
Mhm.
any instrument. They could be the learning of any instrument. But what could precede that is the exposure to music, the engagement in music. And I think every child should have access to that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I will tell parents too, they'll ask me, I taught preschool music for a while at a
Yeah.
local cultural center. And, people would ask me like, well, how early can I start my child on like a formal instrument? And, there's these 3-year-olds there. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Just go buy like a cheap keyboard,
Yeah.
get one on Craigslist, get a ukulele, get something that costs you, $30 or
Yeah.
whatever it is, and let them play on
Yeah.
it. Let them just figure out what happens. Like when I move this way up the keyboard, the sounds change in this way, and they don't have the vocabulary yet,
Yeah.
for like pitch and rhythm, they don't necessarily know all that, but it allows them to engage in a meaningful way.
Right.
And I think that that's so good. And I talked about this with Gabi before too. I grew up going to hear my sister's classical music concerts. My sister's a professional double bassist. And so I grew up going to hear her in New York City, at Carnegie Hall and Alice Tully and all those. She went to
Amazing.
Juilliard. And so I would be this little girl, and like you said, here's my memory, right? I was this little girl sitting there. I can still smell the concert hall and hear the tuning in my mind, like
Yeah.
the orchestra tuning beforehand.
I love
Um,
that sound, by the way. To me, it's so,
so
I
it's so
love,
good.
I was, as a kid, I was just like, this is it. I love that sound of orchestra tuning.
Yeah.
All right.
It's so good. No, it's totally okay. So, I mean, that was sort of a unique exposure. Not everybody has a classical sister, but my childhood was filled with listening to her practice,
Yeah.
hearing those songs performed then as an
Yeah.
orchestra, right? And I think that even if you don't have access to live music right away, almost everybody has access to recorded music that you
Yes.
can at least start with, right?
Right.
Anyway, so this obviously, we're going to have to do a whole other interview sometime just about
Sure.
like music into your homeschool.
That'd be
Um,
fun. I would love that.
Before we go, tell us a little bit about your membership and where we can find you.
Oh, thanks, Eddie. So, homeschoolmusiccollective.com is the
Mhm.
site that will give you all the information. But again, with this mission of mine, I really believe that, because imagine if every child had access to music education, what would the political landscape be? Because we're struggling with that right now. What would our societal norms be? What could we? Yeah, music has so many powerful
Mhm.
elements to it, and it really is transformational, both
Mhm.
in the physical structure of the brain as well as in the emotional capacity of an individual. And
Yes.
so if yeah, I just believe that every child should have access. Now, as a homeschooling community, most of us electively have chosen to be on one income, right? So one parent can stay home, the other one works. And so I think a lot of the members of our community see music as education as an extra.
Yeah.
It's an extra element that can be added, but you know what? We can't really afford piano lessons, and so,
And it's so
and I think that,
expensive, especially if you have multiple children
well, I
to
can tell
get
you what one
by.
child spends in
Oh,
my studio downstairs. Absolutely. And that's just one child. I mean,
yeah.
and then if you add music theory, which is another element I teach, I mean, it could be upwards of $300 for one child. Well, if you
Yes.
have four children, how do you equally decide who
It's
gets
like
what? Well, you
mortgage,
can't,
right?
right?
Or
So
yeah.
the end is that you don't do anything. And
Mhm.
it's to me, that's a sad state of affairs, especially for a community that I so love. I'm such an advocate for our homeschooling lifestyle. And so this is, I think about my brother. He has 7 children. They're 14 and under, all the way down. There's no way that he could afford music education for every single one of them. And so I took my studio and put it into this membership community where it's a very low flat rate, and every single member of the family has access to piano lessons and music theory. They
Mm.
have access to me, and then I have essentially a master session every month where a teacher from all of our colleagues will come in and do a workshop or a presentation to help enhance that journey. But music learning is such a beautiful endeavor. And I contend that it should not be an extracurricular or superfluous
Mhm.
element. To me, it's as foundational as reading and writing and arithmetic.
Yes.
It has
Yes.
to be included in your education
Yeah.
because the enrichment that comes from that, the personal enrichment, but also the outward expression of that, it just is. Musicians just add so much to our world. I mean, imagine a world devoid of music. Imagine, regardless of the genre, blues or
Yeah.
jazz, or Latin or pop,
Right. It
or
doesn't
whatever it is
go
that we're going into.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's where I spend most of my time. Is at homeschoolmusiccollective.com, and they can always reach me there. That's where I
Yeah,
am.
yeah, I love it. And I looked into it, and I can attest to the fact that Gabi's membership program is going to save you a ton of
Oh,
money.
I hope so. I hope that's my goal. Like it
Paying
just.
me to say this. I'm
Yeah.
just saying it because I know I would have parents say to me like, "I'm so sorry, we have to quit lessons because we just can't afford it." I'm like, I understand. I couldn't afford me
Yes.
either, And this is, when I was teaching at different community music studios, when parents are paying like basically $1 a minute for their lessons, like
It's sometimes in my studio, it's a little bit more. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and it depends on where you are, right? But yeah, like it's very, very difficult
Yeah.
for parents to afford that. And so Gabi has created this membership that you're paying one small fee to get all your kids in there, and I think that that's amazing.
Yeah.
So that right now you're not opening that again till springtime, right?
That's correct. Well, actually, it'll open in January, the latter part of
Oh, January.
January. And so
Okay.
I'd encourage anyone that is interested to head over to homeschoolmusiccollective.com and sign up for the waitlist.
Um,
And the only reason that I close it is because I really want to concentrate on the members that are in there during that time and kind of
right.
onboard them, walk them through the modules, help them to select an instrument, because that's a very frequent question I get.
Yeah.
What is a keyboard? Well, every piano has a keyboard. There are really only acoustic pianos or digital pianos. So even
Mhm.
changing the vocabulary there so that they can define and articulate what exactly they're looking for is important. And so, I only open it for a few days and then I close it again so I can concentrate on those members and really help their children to make progress through that
Yeah.
music learning journey.
Oh, that's so awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Gabby. I'm thinking, I wanted to hear really a lot about your experience coming from the education world, coming into the homeschool world, but I feel like there's so much more we could unpack about the music world
I am
too.
so sorry if I overwhelmed any of your
No,
listeners or
not at
everyone.
all.
I mean, clearly, I'm a little bit anti-government school. I'm very,
Aw.
very pro homeschooling. I'm very pro freedom. Because this lifestyle is absolutely beautiful. And for all of those your listeners that are new to the lifestyle, I've just been in it 9 years. There are people that have been in it far longer than I have, that have tread and literally marched the way for our freedom and our liberty in this lifestyle. But I guess what I would say is that no one knows your children better than you do. You're their mama, right? You taught them how to hold a fork, how to tie their shoe, and so you are the best person equipped. Now, that's not to say that you can't outsource chemistry one day, right? You can. That's absolutely possible. But
Homeschooling doesn't mean that you don't outsource.
correct.
It just means that you're helping to create the education for
That's
you.
correct.
Right.
That's correct.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I absolutely support and advocate that, and want to encourage moms to find the courage to essentially push back against the narrative, believe in themselves, in their families, and choose this lifestyle for their families.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing all of your perspective with us today, Gabby.
Oh.
Again, you can visit Gabby at homeschoolmusiccollective.com and see what she has to offer there. And thank you again.
It was so much fun. It's like I didn't bring my cup of coffee, but it's like sitting around the kitchen table just chit-chatting about life.
So nice. Texas to Pennsylvania, right?
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thanks, Abby. Good to see you.
Good to see you.